Darcy Norman. I think part of our programming starts around with profiling the athletes, so capturing information around range motion, functional movement, strength, power, looking at their capacities, then their skill or their application to those capacities to skill, like sprinting and changing directions. And that's where VueMotion comes in, is looking at both linear and multi-directional speed and acceleration. And then from there, once we kind of have those profiling numbers, that helps drive programming, what both the team needs to do as well as the player needs to do individually. And then we can capture that information in real time throughout our programming to continually see, is our programming have an effect, positive or negative, on the player to help improve those scenarios. And then the other way we use it is to compare all those numbers and kind of differentially diagnose where the limiting factor is to performance. So if they have great range of motion, they should theoretically be able to express that in the skill of the activity. So if they lack range of motion, then we wouldn't expect them to see it in the skill. Or we may see compensation patterns where you clean up this range of motion, all of a sudden they're able to demonstrate more appropriate patterns in their skill. And then the same thing with your work capacity. So do they have the requisite functional movement? Do they have the requisite strength? And can they express that strength through both horizontal and vertical power? So, our philosophy is, we don't want to make it a testing day per se. It's just part of how we train. And then we're capturing numbers in real time. And so, just as an example with VueMotion, if we're doing top-up runs with the guys and, guys need sprints, we can just set up the cameras, they sprint through the beams of the cameras, and we, instantly have feedback once it's processed through VueMotion. And then same thing, if we're doing more multi-directional stuff, as part of the finisher, we could do some kind of variation of a 10:05 activity, turn it into a head-to-head competition, set up cameras, capture it all, and, turn around and you got a really competitive, quick scenario. And so, one example I always say with the usability of VueMotion is I ended up testing 120 tests in 9 minutes and 16 seconds with 20 different players. So we did 10:05 right, 10:05 left, 20:05 right and left, and a 30:05 right and left, all with 20 players. And it took 9 minutes and 16 seconds to capture. And then, it was just a matter of the system processing the information and giving us the results. So very easy and fluid to get it within your day-to-day of what you're trying to accomplish. And then, the other big thing is when you sit down and review that information with the athlete, you have the hard data numbers, you have the video of the player themselves so they can see exactly what they're doing. Plus you have the digital layover that's providing the numbers. So it starts to build credibility to the player of what they're seeing, because they're seeing themselves with the information layovers of themselves doing the activity. And so you can slow it down, speed it up. The reports have been great with Motion IQ, getting the kinograms and all those, phases and areas and shapes to really better understand, how the athlete's moving so we can prescribe more effectively. If somebody on the table doesn't have 120 degrees of hip flexion or doesn't have extension, hip extension, and then, it may look like they're getting it in the actual motion of running, but it's usually coming at the expense of another tissue. And so, you want to make sure, and you can show them like, hey, if you don't have it here, you're going to be compensating when you try and get it there. And, that's just going to eat up the system and create less efficiency, which creates more work for the body, tissue breakdown, and potential injury. So it's just, we always follow the formula: power is work divided by time. You have the work side, and time is a factor of efficiency. And the more efficient a mover you are, the less energy you expend, which then allows you more energy to give. You end up recovering quicker, and less stress on the overall tissue and systems. Yeah, I mean, we use the mantra of motivation through education. So you're going to make decisions based on what you know. So if you don't know, you can't make the right decision. So the more information you can gather, both in context and reality, the more information you have to upgrade your decision. So for us, it's very straightforward that way. And that's, why we say we're a data-informed group. We're using this information to help drive better decision-making, which then ultimately helps, reach the goals of what we're trying to accomplish with the athlete. Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a big push in training around intent. And, whether that's velocity-based training, any kind of power measurement that they're seeing in real time to see that, hey, the more effort that I put in, the better results I get. And, there's no better intent than competition. And when you can create that competition, but still video it and capture it and get real information, then it becomes, true information, because that's what's going to happen when they get out on the pitch or on the field, is that they're going to compete. And so you want to try and replicate those scenarios, or at least that intent, with those movements to get the most accurate numbers possible. Yeah, I mean, it depends. Obviously, the periodization and we're just finding areas to capture moments in time of the athlete. So, we might do testing for the top-ups or the solutions, match day +1, because they have to put in, a requisite amount of work to get there. And so we might capture some speed work there. We may do it at the back end of a warm-up to get the 10:05s. So we can capture that, once a month, once every few weeks. We then also have it for baselines on return to plays. So when someone's coming back, we can test them again there as part of their just daily training routine, and capture new numbers to make sure that they're on the right track. And then, as part of our kind of warm-up days. So, on our +4s, which tend to be more multi-directional in small spaces, those are great opportunities to capture the 10:05 at the end of a warm-up. And then, on our big space, high-speed running days, where we work a lot of movement skills, building into speed and so forth. And then we're trying to accumulate sprint speed. That's a great time to get a 20-meter excel or a flying 20. When you're training a team of people, you got to create really structured systems to capture everything. And then you kind of, because the game is played as a team. It doesn't care about the individual. It just cares that you score goals and defend against goals. So, when you're training as a team, then you have to program as a team. And then the next scale is, okay, we know that speed is, linear speed and change of direction or multi-directional speed. So now, you can kind of divide two groups, who needs what. And then, there's the specificity of each of those two groups. So in linear, it's acceleration or absolute speed. So you can divide it again that way. And then multi-directional, it can be very specific to, hey, 180 degree or 135 degree or a 90 degree turn, whatever the case that you're trying. So you can keep making it, noodling it down into the different elements to make it more and more individualized. And then you can cross-reference that with their strength programs or capacity testing in the gym or their power testing, and, with the 1080 or force plates for the horizontal or vertical force. And that will begin to, assess out, like, hey, is it a force production problem? Is it a frequency problem? Yeah. And then, we've talked about the range motion thing. So can they get into the necessary positions or shapes that are best used to execute on those skills? Yeah, I mean, we have range of motion, functional movement, strength, power, and then skill application. And so it's a massive part of the skill application piece, but everything is cross-referenced with everything else, right? Because it's, like we said, motivation through education, telling a story with the information, where, you know, if you change one thing, all of a sudden it changes everything. And so, you know, if I need to get buy-in to why somebody's range of motion needs to improve, and they have to put in the time, you know, with mobility work in the gym, and they see the impact of what that's having on their skill application side, you know, that just is a great positive feedback loop to motivate that person to keep working on it. I started with my philosophy, right? And I think that's the problem in today's day and age. People are just seeking more data, and they don't have a philosophy, or they don't have, you know, a program or a plan or a progression. So, you know, we had those in place already, and now the specific information is helping us dial in exactly what they need. And it may, yes, upgrade how we're doing things and the why we're doing things, but it certainly gives us more fidelity to be able to program better and periodize better and create better programs or progressions, because you're getting that instantaneous feedback of, you know, I applied a stimulus and I get a result. I would boil it down to what's important in sport is efficiency. The more, that's that power divided by time bit, is there's two factors to make somebody powerful: their capacity for work or their efficiency to express that work. So I don't necessarily have to do more work, but if I can get more efficient, I've instantly gotten more powerful, right? And so just by the advent of technology, it's about baking it into what you're doing so you can be more efficient with your programming. You can be more efficient with your time, because you don't have to do a specific testing session and set up all this stuff. It's just part of their training, and you're rolling from one thing to the next. You're more efficient in the time processing that data, right? And getting it. So on the back end, using the AI of VueMotion. And so it's working in the background. So when you come back, it's there ready for you to, you know, evaluate and use the human element, you know, to deal with the information and make upgrade your decisions. Like, I have my programming and periodization and how we do things, as I mentioned, and the data's there to inform us, to help us program better and do things better, to upgrade our systems. And so for me in the future, it's just doing all that faster, right? To where it's less wearables, it's less computational needs, it's less time at the computer to process the information, because it really, at the end of the day, it's about the coach and the athlete and getting better. And so it's kind of, you know, before we had all this technology, it was about the coach. It was a stopwatch, it was a sets and reps, it was, you know, a tape measure, and weight lifted, and it was that simple. It was good conversations and working hard and you know, doing what was right. And then data and technology has slowed down that whole process because of trying to deal with this influx of information and where it all fits and how it all fits. And that's kind of why staffs have exploded, because you need people to manage, massage, and manipulate the data. And when I use manipulate, you know, to get it in the right structures, to be able to look at it appropriately with all your other data that you're collecting. And so for me, the future is just to have that even more seamless. So you do it and information's right there for the next rep.